The morning sun cast long shadows across the small town of Millbrook as 12-year-old twins Sarah and Emma walked their golden retriever, Max, along the old railway path. The sisters looked almost identical with their matching brown ponytails and freckled faces, but their personalities couldn't be more different. Sarah was the cautious one, always checking twice before crossing streets, while Emma was the adventurer, ready to explore every corner of their quiet neighborhood. Max trotted happily between them, his tail wagging as he sniffed at interesting scents along the worn gravel path. The railway line hadn't seen a train in over 2 years since the town's mining operation shut down, making it a perfect place for morning walks. The rusty tracks stretched endlessly in both directions, disappearing into thick woods on one side and toward the old depot on the other. "Look at Max," Emma giggled, watching their dog chase a butterfly that danced just out of reach. "He thinks he can actually catch it." Sarah smiled but kept glancing at her watch. "We should head back soon. Mom said breakfast would be ready by 8, and you know how she gets when we're late." The twins had been walking this route every morning for the past month, ever since summer vacation started. Their mother, a nurse at the local hospital, encouraged the exercise, hoping it would tire them out before she left for her long shifts. Their father worked construction in the next town over, leaving early each morning, so the girls had learned to be responsible and look after each other. As they rounded a familiar bend where wild roses grew along an old fence, Max suddenly stopped. His ears perked up and a low growl rumbled in his throat. The happy, playful dog they knew transformed instantly into something alert and protective. "What's wrong, boy?" Sarah asked, reaching down to pat his head. But Max stepped forward, pulling against his leash with unusual urgency. Emma squinted ahead, trying to see what had caught their dog's attention. The morning mist still clung to the ground in patches, making it difficult to see clearly. "Maybe it's just a deer or something," she suggested. But even she could sense something wasn't right. Max continued forward, his nose to the ground, following a scent that seemed to lead directly toward the railway tracks. The twins followed reluctantly, Sarah's nervousness growing with each step. They had always been told to stay away from the actual tracks, even though no trains came through anymore. As they got closer, they could hear something unusual, a sound that didn't belong in their peaceful morning routine. It was faint at first, like someone calling out, but the words were unclear. Max's growling intensified, and he began barking in short, sharp bursts that echoed off the surrounding trees. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, grabbing her sister's arm. Emma nodded, her usual boldness replaced by concern. "It sounds like someone's in trouble." The mist began to clear as the sun climbed higher, and suddenly they could see shapes ahead on the tracks. At first it looked like debris or old equipment left behind from the railway's closure. But as they moved closer, guided by Max's insistent pulling, the shapes began to take on a more disturbing form. "Sarah," Emma said quietly, her voice trembling slightly, "those aren't things on the tracks." The twins stopped walking, both of them realizing simultaneously that what they were seeing were people. 2 figures lay motionless on the railway tracks, partially hidden by the morning shadows. Max continued barking, but his tone had changed from warning to distress. Sarah felt her heart racing. "We need to go get help," she said, already turning back toward town. But Emma caught her arm. "Wait, what if they're hurt? What if they need help right now?" The sisters stood frozen for a moment, torn between their instinct to run for safety and their concern for whoever was on the tracks. Max made the decision for them, breaking free from Emma's loose grip on his leash and running toward the figures, barking frantically. "Max, come back!" both girls called, but their loyal dog ignored them, clearly believing his humans needed to follow. With no choice but to chase after their pet, the twins ran forward, their hearts pounding with each step. As they got closer, the scene became clearer and more shocking. 2 men lay on the tracks, and it quickly became obvious they weren't just resting or hurt from an accident. Their hands were tied behind their backs with what looked like rope or heavy cord. Their mouths were covered with tape, and their legs were bound together. Most shocking of all, both men were wearing police uniforms. Their badges caught the morning sunlight, and their duty belts lay scattered nearby, obviously removed by whoever had done this to them. The officers were conscious but clearly exhausted and distressed. When they saw the twins approaching, their eyes widened with a mixture of relief and worry. They began making urgent sounds through their taped mouths, trying to communicate despite their restraints. Max reached them first, sniffing around the officers and whimpering with confusion. He clearly knew these were people who needed help, but he didn't understand why they couldn't move or speak properly. Emma was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh my God, Sarah, someone tied up police officers." Sarah felt sick to her stomach. Who would do something like this? And why? The officers continued trying to communicate, their eyes desperate and urgent. One of them, a middle-aged man with gray hair visible beneath his police cap, kept looking back and forth between the girls and something further down the tracks, as if trying to warn them about something. The twins realized they were facing a situation far more serious and dangerous than anything they had ever encountered. These weren't just injured people who needed medical attention. They were victims of what was clearly a crime. Someone had deliberately tied up 2 police officers and left them on abandoned railway tracks. As the full weight of the situation began to sink in, both girls understood that their quiet morning walk had just become something that would change their lives forever. The question now was what to do next and whether they were already in danger themselves. Emma took a deep breath and stepped closer to the bound officers despite Sarah's whispered protests. "We have to help them," she said firmly, kneeling beside the gray-haired officer who seemed to be trying hardest to communicate. The man's name tag read Officer Martinez, and his dark eyes were filled with urgency as he looked at Emma. He kept jerking his head toward something behind the girls, making urgent sounds through the tape covering his mouth. Emma followed his gaze but saw only trees and empty tracks stretching into the distance. "Sarah, I think he's trying to warn us about something," Emma said. Her voice shaking slightly, Sarah reluctantly moved closer, Max pressing against her legs as if sensing her fear. "Maybe we should just run back to town and get help," she suggested again, but even as she spoke, she knew they couldn't leave these officers here alone. The second officer, younger with blonde hair, was trying to point with his bound hands toward his duty belt that lay several feet away. Emma noticed his radio was still clipped to the belt, its antenna catching the morning light. "The radio!" Emma exclaimed. "We can call for help." She scrambled over to the scattered equipment, grabbing the radio with trembling hands. She had seen police shows on television but had never actually used a real police radio before. The device was heavier than she expected, with multiple buttons and a small screen that showed various numbers and letters. "How do we use this thing?" Sarah asked, joining her sister. Emma pressed what she hoped was the right button and spoke into the device. "Hello, can anyone hear me?" "We need help." Static crackled from the radio, but no voice responded. She tried a different button and suddenly voices filled the air. Other officers talking about routine patrols and traffic stops. The twins realized they were listening to police communications for the entire area. "Wait for a break in the conversation," Sarah suggested, remembering something she had learned in a safety class at school. When there was a pause in the radio chatter, Emma pressed the button again. "Emergency! Emergency! This is 2 kids, and we found police officers tied up on the old railway tracks near Millbrook." The radio fell silent for a moment, then exploded with voices asking for clarification, location details, and requesting identification. Emma felt overwhelmed by the rapid-fire questions coming through the speaker. Officer Martinez was making even more urgent sounds now, and both officers were struggling against their bonds with renewed energy. Their behavior made it clear that time was running out for something, though the twins couldn't understand what. "They keep looking behind us," Sarah observed, turning to scan the tree line again. "What if whoever did this is still around?" The thought sent chills down both girls' spines. They had been so focused on helping the officers that they hadn't considered their own safety. Max seemed to sense their growing anxiety and began growling softly, his attention also fixed on the woods behind them. A voice came clearly through the radio. "This is dispatch. Please identify yourself and provide your exact location. Units are being dispatched to your area." Emma pressed the button again. "We're on the old railway tracks about a mile from the Millbrook depot. There are 2 officers here and they're tied up with rope. Their badges say Martinez and—" She looked at the younger officer's name tag. "Williams, I copy that. Officers Martinez and Williams have been reported missing since last night. Stay with them but be aware of your surroundings. Help is on the way." "Missing since last night?" The twins exchanged worried glances. That meant these officers had been lying here for hours, probably all night in the cold. Emma felt anger building inside her at whoever could do such a thing. Sarah was studying the knots binding the officers. "These ropes look really tight," she said. "Maybe we can try to untie them?" Emma nodded, and they both began working on Officer Martinez's bonds. The knots were indeed tight and had been pulled even tighter by the officer's struggles to free himself. The twins' small fingers worked carefully at the rope, but progress was slow. As they worked, Officer Williams managed to work one corner of the tape loose from his mouth. "Listen carefully," he whispered urgently, his voice hoarse from hours of trying to call for help. "The men who did this said they'd be back. You need to hide." "What men?" Emma asked, her hands freezing on the rope. "3 of them. They robbed the bank in Riverside yesterday and took us hostage when we tried to stop them. They left us here while they went to get something, but they said they'd return." Sarah's face went pale. "Bank robbers? They're coming back?" Officer Williams nodded grimly. "They need us alive for some reason, but they won't hesitate to hurt anyone who gets in their way. You girls need to get out of here now." But before the twins could respond, Max began barking frantically, his attention focused on the woods they had been worrying about. Through the trees, they could hear the sound of breaking branches and voices getting closer. "They're coming back," Officer Martinez managed to say, having also worked part of his tape loose. "Hide in the woods on the other side of the tracks. Don't come back until more police arrive." Emma felt torn between running for safety and staying to help the officers. "We can't just leave you here." "You have to," Officer Williams insisted. "If they catch you, they'll use you against us. Go now." The voices in the woods were getting louder, and the twins could make out angry words and complaints about something not being where it was supposed to be. Sarah grabbed Emma's arm, and both girls realized they had run out of time to debate. "Come on, Max," Emma whispered, and the 3 of them ran across the tracks toward the opposite tree line, Emma still clutching the police radio. As they reached the safety of the thick undergrowth, they could hear the bank robbers emerging onto the tracks behind them. Rough voices filled the air, along with curses and angry questions directed at the bound officers. Crouched behind a fallen log with Max pressed against them, the twins listened in terror as the dangerous men they had just barely avoided came back to claim their prisoners. Hidden behind the fallen log, Sarah and Emma held their breath as 3 men emerged from the woods near the railway tracks. The twins could see them clearly through gaps in the undergrowth, and what they saw made their blood run cold. The first man was tall and thin with dirty blonde hair and clothes that looked like he had slept in them. He carried a large duffel bag that seemed heavy, and he kept looking around nervously as if expecting trouble. The second man was shorter but much broader, with dark hair and a thick beard. He had what looked like a gun tucked into his belt. The third man appeared to be their leader. He was average height but moved with confidence, barking orders at the other 2. He wore a red baseball cap and had a scar running down his left cheek that was visible even from the twins' hiding spot. "I told you idiots to mark where we buried it," the leader snapped at his companions. "Now we've wasted half the morning digging in the wrong spots." "It's around here somewhere, boss," the thin man replied, setting down his heavy bag. "We just need to look more carefully." Emma realized they were talking about something they had hidden in the woods, probably money from the bank robbery. The police radio in her hands crackled softly with continued chatter, from officers responding to their emergency call, but she quickly turned the volume down to avoid being heard. Officer Martinez looked up at the returning criminals with a mixture of defiance and concern. "You're making this worse for yourselves," he called out, his voice stronger now that the tape was partially removed. "Half the county's police force is looking for you by now." The leader laughed coldly and walked over to kick dirt at the bound officer. "That's exactly why we need you 2 alive, cop. You're our ticket out of here when the heat gets too close." Officer Williams struggled against his bonds. "Let us go and maybe the judge will go easier on you." "This can't end well." "It'll end just fine," the bearded man growled, "as long as we find our money and get to the state line before sunset." Sarah whispered urgently to her sister. "We need to tell the police where these guys are, but if we use the radio, they'll hear us." Emma nodded, thinking quickly. The radio continued to crackle with updates about units converging on their area. But the twins knew the officers probably didn't know exactly where to look along the long stretch of abandoned railway. Max seemed to understand the need for silence, pressing close to the girls without making a sound. His training as a family pet was serving them well. He was protective, but disciplined enough to follow their lead. The Bank robbers spent several minutes arguing about where they had hidden their stolen money the night before. It became clear they had been in a hurry when they buried it and hadn't paid enough attention to landmarks. Now in the daylight, everything looked different. "Start digging again," the leader ordered, pointing to various spots in the woods. "And this time fan out more. It's got to be within 100 yards of those tracks." As the three men spread out to search, Emma realized this might be their chance to communicate with the approaching police without being overheard. She carefully turned up the radio volume just enough for them to hear. "Unit 7 and 12 approaching the railway area from the south," came a voice through the speaker. No visual contact yet. Emma pressed the transmit button and whispered as quietly as possible into the radio. "They're here. 3 men with the officers. One has a gun. They're looking for something they buried in the woods. Copy that. Can you describe the suspects?" Sarah leaned close to the radio as Emma continued whispering. "One tall and thin with blonde hair. One short with a beard and the gun. The leader has a red cap and a scar on his face. Excellent information. Stay hidden and keep us updated if you can do so safely." The twins felt a small surge of hope, knowing that help was getting closer and that they were providing valuable intelligence. But their relief was short-lived when they heard the bearded man shout from nearby. "Found it. The bag's over here." All 3 robbers converged on a spot in the woods uncomfortably close to where the twins were hiding. They began digging frantically with their hands and small tools, pulling up a large black garbage bag that had been buried under a thin layer of dirt and leaves. "Finally," the leader said with satisfaction. "Now we can get out of here." But as they stood up with their recovered loot, Max made a crucial mistake. A squirrel ran across a branch overhead and the dog's natural instincts took over. He barked once sharply before the twins could stop him. The sound echoed through the quiet woods like a gunshot. All 3 criminals froze, then slowly turned toward the area where the twins were hiding. "What was that?" the thin man asked nervously. The leader's eyes narrowed as he scanned the tree line. "Sounded like a dog. Could be wild, could be someone's pet. Could be cops with a K9 unit," the bearded man suggested, his hand moving to the gun in his belt. "Officer Martinez," thinking quickly, called out from the tracks. "Probably just a stray. There are lots of them around here since the mine closed." But the leader wasn't convinced. He began walking slowly toward the woods where Max's bark had come from, his eyes searching every shadow and possible hiding spot. Sarah felt her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Emma clutched the radio in Max's collar with white knuckles, knowing that their lives might depend on staying perfectly still and silent. The criminal leader stopped just 10 feet from their hiding spot, close enough that they could see the details of his scar and the cold calculation in his eyes. He stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, listening and watching for any sign of movement. Then, from somewhere in the distance, came the sound of police sirens. The leader's head snapped up and he cursed loudly. "Time to go. Grab the cops and let's move." The twins watched in horror as the 3 men ran back to the tracks and began untying Officers Martinez and Williams from the railway ties, clearly planning to take them as hostages for their escape. The sound of police sirens grew louder as the 3 bank robbers roughly hauled Officers Martinez and Williams to their feet. The criminals had untied their legs but kept their hands bound behind their backs, making it clear they intended to use the officers as human shields during their escape. "Move," the leader barked, shoving Officer Williams forward with the barrel of a gun that had appeared in his hand. "We're walking out of here nice and easy, and these cops are coming with us." Emma felt sick watching the scene unfold. She pressed the radio's transmit button and whispered urgently, "They're taking the officers as hostages. Moving north along the tracks toward the old depot. Copy that. All units, suspects are mobile with hostages. Exercise extreme caution." The bearded man grabbed the heavy money bag while the thin blonde man served as a lookout. They began forcing the 2 officers to walk ahead of them along the railway tracks, using them as protection against any police sharpshooters who might be positioning themselves in the area. Officer Martinez stumbled slightly, still weak from being bound all night, but he caught himself and kept walking. Emma could see him looking around, probably trying to figure out how to escape or create an opportunity for the approaching police to act. "We need to follow them," Emma whispered to her sister. "The police need to know exactly where they are." Sarah shook her head frantically. "It's too dangerous. What if they see us? What if the police can't find them and something happens to those officers?" Emma replied, We're the only ones who can keep track of where they're going. Max seemed to sense the urgency in their whispered conversation. He looked back and forth between the twins, then toward the group moving along the tracks as if he understood they needed to follow. After a moment of internal struggle, Sarah nodded. Okay, but we stay far back and in the trees. And if they spot us, we run. The twins began carefully making their way through the woods parallel to the railway tracks, staying hidden among the trees while keeping the criminals and their hostages in sight. Max padded silently beside them, his hunting dog instincts helping him move quietly through the underbrush. Every few minutes, Emma would whisper updates into the police radio, providing location information as the group moved steadily toward the abandoned railway depot. The old building had been empty for years, its windows boarded up and its platforms crumbling from neglect. They're approaching the depot from the south, Emma reported quietly. The building looks empty, but there might be places to hide inside. Understood. Units are moving into position around the depot. Continue to maintain safe distance and report any changes. As they got closer to the depot, the twins could see the criminals were getting more nervous. The police sirens seemed to be coming from multiple directions now, and the leader kept looking around frantically as if expecting officers to appear from behind every tree and building. There's got to be a way out of this place, the thin man said, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. Maybe we can steal a car from the depot parking lot. That lot's been empty for 2 years, Officer Williams called back to them. Nothing but weeds and broken glass. The leader struck the officer across the shoulder with his gun. Shut up. Nobody asked you. Emma felt anger flare inside her at seeing the officer mistreated, but she forced herself to stay calm and keep reporting to the police. They just hit Officer Williams. The leader is getting more violent. The group reached the depot building, and the criminals forced their hostages around to the back, where there was a loading dock that provided some cover from the approaching sirens. Emma and Sarah positioned themselves behind a pile of old railroad ties that gave them a clear view of the scene. Through the radio, they could hear police units coordinating their positions around the building. Unit 7 in position on the north side. Unit 12 covering the main entrance. Unit 3 approaching from the east. The leader seemed to realize they were being surrounded. He began shouting toward the building where he assumed police were hiding. We've got 2 of your cops here. Anyone tries to be a hero and they're going to get hurt. Officer Martinez took advantage of the leader's distraction to work at the ropes binding his hands. His years of police training had taught him various escape techniques, and he had been gradually loosening his bonds during the walk to the depot. Sarah noticed what the officer was doing and nudged Emma. Look, Officer Martinez is almost free. Emma saw it too and immediately understood the implications. If the officer could free himself at the right moment, it might create the distraction the police needed to act. She pressed the radio button and whispered, Officer Martinez is working on his ropes. He might be able to break free soon. The response came back quickly. Copy that. Tell him to wait for our signal. We need coordination. But before Emma could figure out how to communicate with Officer Martinez without giving away their position, the situation took an unexpected turn. The thin blonde man who had been carrying the money bag suddenly dropped it and pointed toward the woods where the twins were hiding. Boss, I saw something move over there. Behind those railroad ties. Emma's heart stopped. They had been spotted despite their careful efforts to stay hidden. The leader immediately swung his gun toward their hiding spot, his scarred face twisted with anger. Come out now, he shouted. I know someone's there. The twins looked at each other in terror. They were too far from any other cover to run, and Max was pressed between them, sensing their fear. They had nowhere to go. I said, come out, the leader repeated, firing a shot into the air that echoed loudly off the depot building. Now! Officer Martinez saw his chance. The gunshot had startled everyone, including the other 2 criminals. He gave a final hard pull against his loosened ropes and felt them give way. His hands came free just as the leader was focused on the twins' hiding spot. In one smooth motion, the experienced officer grabbed the bearded man's gun and shouted, Police! Drop your weapons! Chaos erupted around the depot as police sirens screamed closer, and the criminals realized their hostage situation had just collapsed. Emma grabbed Sarah's hand and Max's collar, knowing they had seconds to act before the gunfight began. The moment Officer Martinez broke free and grabbed the bearded man's gun, everything happened at once. The twins heard shouting from multiple directions as police officers emerged from their positions around the depot building, their weapons drawn and voices commanding the criminals to surrender. "Drop your weapons, get on the ground now," came the authoritative shouts from at least 6 different officers who had been waiting for exactly this opportunity. The leader with the scarred face spun around in confusion, his gun wavering between the approaching police and Officer Martinez, who now had his partner's service weapon trained on him. The thin blonde man threw his hands up immediately, clearly wanting no part of a gunfight with trained police officers. But the bearded man, now disarmed by Officer Martinez, made a desperate decision. Instead of surrendering, he lunged toward the twins' hiding spot, apparently thinking he could grab them as new hostages to replace the freed officers. Emma saw him coming and made a split-second choice that surprised even herself. Instead of running, she stood up and shouted as loudly as she could, "Max, attack!" Their golden retriever, who had been trained as a family pet and had never shown aggression toward humans, seemed to understand that his beloved family was in danger. The dog launched himself at the charging criminal with a fierce bark that echoed off the depot walls. Max knocked the bearded man off his feet just as police officers reached their position. The criminal hit the ground hard, with 80 pounds of protective dog standing over him, growling in a way the twins had never heard before. "Good boy, Max," Sarah called out, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and pride. The leader, seeing his partner captured and surrounded by armed police, finally dropped his weapon and raised his hands. Okay, I give up." Officer Williams, still bound but mobile, kicked the leader's dropped gun away from his reach while other officers moved in to make arrests. The whole confrontation was over in less than 2 minutes, but to the twins it felt like it had lasted hours. Detective Susan Chen, who had arrived with the backup units, approached the twins' hiding spot carefully. She was a small woman with kind eyes, but her voice carried the authority of someone used to handling serious situations. "Are you girls okay?" she asked gently, showing her badge. "I'm Detective Chen. You're the ones who called this in?" Emma nodded, still clutching the police radio. "We were just walking our dog when we found the officers tied up on the tracks." "You did incredibly well," Detective Chen said with genuine admiration. "Your radio reports helped us coordinate this whole operation. You may have saved these officers' lives." As paramedics arrived to check on Officers Martinez and Williams, both men made sure to thank the twins personally. Officer Martinez, despite being exhausted from his ordeal, knelt down to pet Max and shake both girls' hands. "This dog of yours is something special," he said with a grateful smile. "And you two showed more courage than most adults would have in this situation." Officer Williams, after having his bonds cut and receiving medical attention, joined them. "I don't know how to thank you. When we were tied up out there all night, we never imagined 2 kids and their dog would be the ones to save us." Sarah, who had been quiet during most of the excitement, finally found her voice. "We were scared, but we couldn't just leave you there." "Being scared but doing the right thing anyway," Detective Chen observed. "That's exactly what courage is." As the 3 bank robbers were loaded into police cars, Emma learned more about what had happened. The men had robbed the Riverside Community Bank the previous afternoon, making off with over $50,000 in cash. Officers Martinez and Williams had spotted their getaway car during a routine patrol and attempted to stop them. "They ambushed us at a fake traffic accident," Officer Martinez explained to Detective Chen while the twins listened. "Had us out of our car and disarmed before we knew what was happening. They needed hostages in case things went wrong, so they tied us up on those tracks and left us there while they hid the money." The thin blonde man, whose name turned out to be Tommy Fletcher, was eager to cooperate with police in hopes of a lighter sentence. He told investigators that the plan had been to lay low for a few days, then use the officers as bargaining chips if police got too close. "They never expected anyone to find the cops out there," Detective Chen explained to the twins. "That section of railway hasn't been used in years, and hardly anyone ever walks back there." Emma realized how lucky their timing had been. If we had decided to walk somewhere else this morning, or if Max hadn't heard them. "Don't think about what might have happened," Detective Chen advised. "Think about what you actually did. You saved 2 good officers and helped catch some very dangerous criminals." The local news crews began arriving as word spread about the dramatic rescue. Detective Chen spoke to the twins' parents, who had rushed to the scene after being contacted by police. Their mother, still in her nurse's scrubs from working the night shift, hugged both girls tightly. "I'm so proud of you," she said with tears in her eyes. "But please promise me you'll never do anything this dangerous again." Their father, who had left his construction job the moment he got the call, was more direct. "You girls could have been seriously hurt. What were you thinking?" But Officer Martinez overheard and stepped in. "Sir, with respect, your daughters did everything right. They called for help immediately. They stayed hidden when they needed to, and they provided crucial information that made this arrest possible. They showed better judgment than many trained adults would have." As the afternoon wore on and statements were taken, the twins learned they would likely be called as witnesses when the case went to trial. Detective Chen assured them that the criminals would almost certainly accept plea bargains rather than face a jury after being caught so clearly in the act. "The evidence is overwhelming," she explained. "Your radio transmissions, the officer's testimony, multiple police witnesses to the arrest. These guys are going to prison for a long time." By evening, the twins were exhausted but proud. They had started the day expecting nothing more than a routine dog walk, and ended it as local heroes who had helped solve a major crime. Max, meanwhile, was enjoying all the attention and extra treats that came with being a hero dog. As they finally headed home, Emma looked back at the railway tracks where their adventure had begun. It was hard to believe that just that morning, they had been ordinary kids living ordinary lives in a quiet small town. 3 weeks later, life in Millbrook had returned to something resembling normal, though the twins found that nothing felt quite the same as it had before their encounter with the bank robbers. Sarah and Emma had become minor celebrities in their small town, with neighbors stopping them on the street to congratulate them and local businesses offering them free ice cream and movie tickets. The story had made regional news, with headlines like "Twin Heroes Save Police Officers" and "Brave Girls and Their Dog Foil Bank Robbery." Their school principal had called them to the office not for punishment, but to present them with special recognition certificates that would go in their permanent files. Max had become something of a celebrity himself. The local pet store had named him Dog of the Month and put his picture in their front window. Children who had never paid attention to the twins before now wanted to pet their famous dog and hear the story of how he had tackled a dangerous criminal. But fame, the twins discovered, came with complications they hadn't expected. Emma found herself getting frustrated when classmates embellished the story, claiming she had fought the bank robbers with martial arts, or that Max had bitten off someone's arm. The real story was dramatic enough without the exaggerations. Sarah struggled with different issues. She had always been the cautious twin, and the experience had left her more anxious than before. She found herself checking locks multiple times and feeling nervous when their parents were late coming home. Their mother had scheduled sessions with the school counselor to help both girls process their traumatic experience. "It's completely normal to feel unsettled after something like this," Mrs. Patterson, the counselor, explained during one of their sessions. "You witnessed and participated in something that most people never experience in their entire lives. It's okay to need time to adjust." The criminal case had progressed quickly, just as Detective Chen had predicted. Tommy Fletcher, the thin blonde man, had agreed to testify against his partners in exchange for a reduced sentence. The bearded man, whose real name was Marcus Donnelly, was facing charges for assault on a police officer in addition to the bank robbery. The leader, identified as Vincent Torino, had an extensive criminal record and was looking at decades in prison. Officer Martinez and Officer Williams had both returned to full duty after taking a few days off to recover from their ordeal. They made a point of stopping by the twins' house regularly, sometimes just to chat, and other times to update them on the progress of the case. "The district attorney says your testimony will be crucial," Officer Williams explained during one of these visits. "You're the ones who saw everything from the beginning and can describe the whole sequence of events." Emma felt nervous about testifying in court, but also determined to see justice done. "Will we have to face those men again?" "You'll be in a courtroom with lots of security," Officer Martinez assured her. "And we'll be right there with you. These guys can't hurt anyone anymore." The trial was scheduled for the following month, but in the meantime, The twins had to deal with unexpected attention from beyond their small town. A true crime television show had contacted their parents about featuring their story, and a children's book publisher wanted to turn their experience into an educational book about safety and courage. Their parents were protective of the girls' privacy and turned down most of these requests, but they did agree to let the local newspaper do a follow-up story focusing on how the experience had affected the family. "We're proud of what Sarah and Emma did," their mother told the reporter, "but we want people to remember that they're still just kids who need normal childhoods. They've been through enough excitement for a while." The attention had also brought unexpected connections. Letters arrived from children across the state who had heard their story and wanted to share their own experiences or simply express admiration. One letter came from a boy in another town who had helped police catch a shoplifter, and another from a girl who had reported suspicious activity that led to the arrest of someone selling drugs near her school. "It's like we accidentally started some kind of movement," Emma observed. Reading through the latest batch of mail, Detective Chen, who had stayed in touch with the family, brought a different perspective when she visited. "You didn't start anything," she told the twins. "Kids help police solve crimes more often than people realize. You just did it in a very dramatic way that caught everyone's attention." She shared statistics showing that children's observations and reports were responsible for solving hundreds of cases each year across the country. "Kids notice things adults miss," she explained. "They're not yet trained to ignore unusual situations the way adults sometimes are." The conversation made Sarah think about their regular walks with Max. "Do you think we should keep using the railway path? It still makes me nervous." Their father had been wondering the same thing. The path held unpleasant memories now, but it was also where their daughters had shown incredible bravery and made a real difference in their community. "Maybe we could walk there together as a family," their mother suggested. "We could reclaim that space and remember that it's where good triumphed over evil." Emma liked the idea immediately, but Sarah needed more time to consider it. The experience had affected the twins differently, with Emma seeming to gain confidence from their successful handling of the crisis, while Sarah had become more aware of potential dangers in their previously safe world. Max, for his part, seemed largely unaffected by his brief career as a crime-fighting dog. He was the same happy, playful golden retriever he had always been, though he did seem to enjoy the extra attention and treats that came with his newfound fame. The week before the trial was scheduled to begin, the twins received unexpected news. Vincent Torino, the scarred leader of the bank robbers, had decided to accept a plea bargain rather than face trial. This meant the twins wouldn't have to testify after all, though they were still disappointed not to have their day in court. "Part of me wanted to face him," Emma admitted to her sister, "to show him we weren't afraid anymore." "I'm relieved," Sarah said honestly. "I was dreading having to see him again." Both reactions were perfectly valid, Detective Chen assured them when she delivered the news. Torino would spend 25 years in prison, while his associates received shorter sentences in exchange for their cooperation. As summer vacation continued, the twins gradually found their rhythm again. The story of their heroic morning was becoming part of Millbrook's local legend, but for Sarah and Emma, it was becoming simply part of their personal history. An extraordinary day that had taught them they were braver and more capable than they had ever imagined. 1 year later, Sarah and Emma stood at the same spot on the railway tracks where they had first discovered Officers Martinez and Williams bound and helpless. The morning was crisp and clear, just like that day 12 months ago, but everything felt different now. The twins were no longer 12-year-old girls uncertain of their place in the world. At 13, they carried themselves with quiet confidence earned through an experience that had tested them in ways most adults never face. Sarah had worked through her anxiety with continued counseling, and now served as a peer counselor at school, helping other students who struggled with fear and worry. Emma had channeled her natural boldness into positive directions, joining the school's safety patrol and volunteering with the local police department's community outreach program. She was already talking about a career in law enforcement, inspired by the officers who had become like family to them. Max trotted beside them, older and grayer, but still eager for his morning walks. He wore a special collar now, a gift from the police department with a small badge attached that read, Honorary K-9 Officer Max. The local newspaper had done a feature story about him on the anniversary of the rescue, calling him the golden retriever who helped catch bank robbers. "It's hard to believe it's been a whole year," Sarah said, looking down the tracks toward where the depot building stood in the distance. The old structure had been demolished 6 months ago, finally succumbing to years of neglect and the county's decision that it posed a safety hazard. "Sometimes it feels like it happened yesterday," Emma replied. "Other times it seems like it was someone else's life." The railway path had indeed become a family walking route, just as their mother had suggested. Their parents joined them several mornings a week, and the shared experience had brought the family closer together. Their father had even built a small memorial garden beside the tracks, with flowers and a bench where people could sit and reflect. Officer Martinez and Officer Williams still stopped by regularly, but now it was more social than official. Both men had been promoted in recognition of their service, and Officer Martinez had been transferred to the detective division, where he specialized in bank robbery cases. Officer Williams had joined the department's training division, where he taught new recruits about crisis management and hostage situations. "You know what I think about most?" Officer Williams had told the twins during his last visit. "How differently things could have turned out if you hadn't been brave enough to stay and help." Tommy Fletcher told us later that Torino was planning to kill us once they got safely away. "You literally saved our lives." The criminal trials had all concluded by winter. Vincent Torino received 25 years without the possibility of parole. Marcus Donnelly got 15 years, and Tommy Fletcher, who had cooperated fully with authorities, received 8 years. All 3 men were serving their sentences in different maximum security prisons across the state. Detective Chen, who had become a family friend, brought updates occasionally about other cases the twins' testimony had helped solve. It turned out that Torino had been connected to several other robberies across 3 states, and his conviction had closed multiple unsolved cases. "Your courage that morning had consequences far beyond what you could see," she had explained to them. "Sometimes one brave act creates ripples that spread much further than anyone expects." The twins had eventually accepted some of the media attention, but on their own terms. They had worked with the children's book publisher to create an educational book about personal safety and helping others, with all proceeds going to support programs for crime victims. The book, titled Max and the Railway Heroes, had become popular in elementary schools across the region. They had also participated in a documentary about children who had assisted in solving crimes, sharing their story alongside several other young people who had shown similar courage. The experience had connected them with a network of kids from around the country who understood what it was like to be thrust into extraordinary circumstances. The best part about everything that happened, Emma reflected as they reached the spot where the memorial garden bloomed with colorful flowers, is that we learned we could handle more than we ever thought possible. Sarah nodded, settling onto the memorial bench with Max at her feet. "And we learned that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it." The garden had become a popular spot for local residents, many of whom stopped to read the small plaque their father had installed. It read simply, "In recognition of courage shown by ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, sometimes heroes are hiding in plain sight." As the twins sat quietly in the peaceful morning air, they reflected on how their lives had changed. They were still normal teenagers dealing with homework, friendships, and family responsibilities, but they carried with them the knowledge that they had made a real difference in the world. Their mother often said that the experience had revealed character traits that were already there, just waiting for the right circumstances to emerge. Their father preferred to focus on how the twins had shown that age and size didn't determine someone's ability to help others. "We should probably head back," Sarah said eventually, checking her watch. "Mom's making pancakes for the anniversary breakfast." Every year on this date, their family held a special breakfast to commemorate not just the dramatic rescue, but the lessons they had all learned about courage, family, and community. Officers Martinez and Williams always joined them, along with Detective Chen and sometimes other members of the police department who had been involved in the case. As they walked back toward town, Emma turned for one last look at the railway tracks stretching into the distance. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had decided to sleep in that morning instead of taking Max for his walk?" "I try not to think about it," Sarah replied. "I'd rather focus on what actually happened. We were in the right place at the right time, and we chose to do the right thing." Max barked once as if agreeing with Sarah's assessment, and bounded ahead toward home where the smell of pancakes was beginning to drift from their kitchen window. The twins quickened their pace, eager to rejoin their family and continue building on the foundation of strength and courage they had discovered that extraordinary morning on the abandoned railway tracks. Behind them, the morning sun cast long shadows across the peaceful path, illuminating the memorial garden, where colorful flowers bloomed as a testament to the power of ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things when circumstances call for courage. Their story had become part of Millbrook's history, but more importantly, it had become part of who they were. Young women who knew from experience that they could face whatever challenges life might bring their way.